We advocate to the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate any illegal activity and encourage all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers on the Russ Belville Show are their own, and the Russ Belville Show cannot be held legally responsible for their validity or reliability. Viewer discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we think it can criminalize
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
All right, good day, tokers and tokettes. Welcome to the show. It is Wednesday, March 20th, 2013, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us today. All sorts of great stuff to catch up on today's show. Again, I'm back this weekend from the Atlanta conference, and this next weekend, I just confirmed, I'm heading to the Washington Normal fundraiser in Olympia, Washington at Frankie's Club. That's right off of I-5 there, exit 107, I believe. And heading up to Olympia to appear at a fundraiser there for Washington Normal. I believe Rick Steves is going to be there, among other people. And Frankie's, of course, the first pot-smoking club in America that allowed marijuana smoking shortly after I-502 made it legal on December 6th. So we'll be up there on Saturday night. We'll get some interviews. We'll get some video. We'll have some good times. We'll bring that to you next week. But on today's show, oh boy, all sorts of stuff to get to. Speaking of Washington State, Mark Kleiman has been named Washington's pot czar, so to speak. He's in charge of implementing I-502 with the contract that he won from the Washington State Liquor Control Board. We're going to take a behind-the-headlines look at Mark Kleiman because if that name rings a bell, I interviewed him last July. I'm going to look back at our last July interview and some of the interesting things he said and how that might bode for Washington State legalization, especially for you if you're thinking about starting a business up there. This will be an interesting one. You'll want to stay tuned for that. At 20 after, Brian the Red's not in today. He'll be in later for Red Eyes Reggae Flashback. So I'm going to take care of the Irie Wednesday today with some Easy Star All-Stars. At 1:30, I'm going to bring you a presentation from Tanya Blasbalg. She's a representative from the Canadian Consortium for the Investigation of Cannabinoids, and she is a liaison between the Cannabinoid Research Society and Big Pharma. She had a very interesting presentation in Atlanta and some controversial things she had to say. I think you'll enjoy watching that as well. Plus, I've got some behind-the-scenes video of Diane Goldstein from LEAP interviewing with Fox News down there in Atlanta. And in hour 2, we're going to bring you the complete Georgia Reform Panel, 4 different reform organizations, plus a a public defender from Dublin, Georgia, giving her perspective as well. Lots of information from the first annual Southern Cannabis Reform Conference. All that and more coming up on the Russ Belville Show today. Thanks for joining us. Be right back after this.
You cut people, you smoke trees till you get what you need now. Designer drugs with minted smokes to get through the day. You always get them so high.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Hi, this is Dan Michaels. If you're looking for professional voice talent for your commercial or podcast, I'm your man. Visit danmichaelsaudio.com for more information.
Now, it's time for your 420 radio news for Wednesday, March 20th, 2013. I'm Russ Belville. Florida campaign for medical marijuana gets financial backers from Reuters News. 2 top Democratic fundraisers in Florida have committed to providing the money and the know-how to get the question of legalizing medical marijuana on the state ballot in 2014. Attorney John Morgan said late on Tuesday, quote, "I'm prepared to keep raising money and writing checks until I get the signatures to put it on the ballot." Morgan, who routinely hosts presidents and national political figures at his Orlando area home, recently signed on as chairman of People United for Medical Marijuana Florida, a grassroots organization that operated on a shoestring until now. Morgan was recruited by Ben Pallara, a lobbyist and fundraiser for President Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. Pallara recently became treasurer of the medical marijuana campaign, and he estimates the campaign will cost $10 million. A poll he commissioned for People United found support in Florida for medical marijuana at 70%. A majority of both Republicans and Democrats support passage. Legal pot means big changes for the state's drug-sniffing dogs. This from ComoNews.com. The passage of I-502 in Washington made things difficult enough for the humans tasked with creating and enforcing laws for legal marijuana. Now, try explain the difference between personal use and intent to sell, or the gray area between state and federal law, to a dog. That's why many law enforcement agencies around the state, including the Seattle Police Department and Washington State Patrol, will no longer be training their drug-sniffing dogs to alert for marijuana. The Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys sent out a memo advising the state's law enforcement agencies that narcotics dogs are no longer required to be trained to alert for marijuana in December. And marijuana was removed from the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission's Canine Performance Standards test in January. However, while agencies still have dogs trained to alert for marijuana on patrol, officers will no longer be able to rely solely on a dog's alert when determining probable cause for a search warrant, according to the Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys memo. In the past, a narcotics dog's alert was pretty much all that was needed to get a search warrant. Not all law enforcement agencies are on board with the changes. Tacoma Police Department spokesperson Loretta Kuhl said the department will not be changing any of its procedures for training or using narcotics dogs, as the possession of marijuana is still illegal under federal law. The next marijuana legalization fight, Copenhagen versus the rest of Denmark. This from AtlanticCities.com. The city of Copenhagen wants to legalize cannabis and, if possible, get supplies of the drug from the United States. Following a Europe-wide trend, Denmark's capital has been planning a 3-year experiment that would aim to wrest the city's soft drugs trade away from criminal gangs and place it under direct municipal control. But while city officials overwhelmingly support the move, the Danish national government may not let them proceed. Last year, the national government rejected more tentative plans that Copenhagen city councilors had approved by 39-9. So it's no coincidence that representatives from Seattle were flown in to the city for a conference last week, invited to help craft a policy that stands a better chance of surviving resistance from non-metropolitan Danish and neighboring Swedish mayors. One issue is key. No one wants the Copenhagen model to turn the city into a little Amsterdam, a place aping long-standing Dutch laws where tourists flock to get baked in commercially run coffee shops. Copenhagen, by contrast, would prefer to keep cannabis sales under state monopoly, fixing prices and importing supplies themselves, possibly from U.S. states Washington or Colorado. Police issue scratch and sniff cards to help weed out marijuana growers from Time.com. Police in England are distributing scratch and sniff cards to help members of the public detect the telltale aroma of illicit cannabis farms. The cards, which replicate the distinct smell of growing marijuana, will be mailed to homes in 13 areas throughout the country in hopes they will help people identify cannabis factories in their communities. Ultimate Fighting Championship suspends Alex Caceres following failed drug tests from MMAJunkie.com. The UFC has suspended bantamweight Alex Caceres, 8-5 and 2-3 in the UFC, after he was flagged for marijuana metabolites. Caceres has been suspended 6 months, will attend drug rehab classes, and needs to pass a drug test before he's allowed to continue. He earned a split decision, and it marked his 3rd straight win for the Ultimate Fighter 12 cast member. However, his latest victory will now be recorded as a no contest. And that's your 420 radio news for Wednesday, March 20th, 2013. When we come back, we go behind the headlines and take a look at Washington State's new pot czar and some of his earlier comments that lead us to believe we got no idea what we're in for in Washington State. This is the Russ Belville Show on 420radio.org. We'll be right back. 420radio.org is listener-supported cannabis community radio, and while we value every $4.20 donation that comes in monthly from our members, we take this moment to offer an extra special thanks to our most generous donors who have provided over $1,000 worth of support to 420radio.org. For their privacy's sake, we'll identify these knights and dames of the smoky table as Sir Randy of the Lakes, Dame Kathleen the Beneficent, Dame Kaylee the Wise, Sir Travis of Stumptown, Sir Rolla J of Cush, and others who wish to remain anonymous. Thank you, lords and ladies, for your most generous patronage.
Legalize me. Don't criticize.
I'm just overjoyed. I've been cannabis activist for 40 years.
We are turning the corner on a failed policy that's been disastrous for our communities, and things are going to get better.
80 years ago, we repealed alcohol prohibition in this state. We did it prior to the federal government, and we're doing the same thing when it comes to marijuana. We are a step ahead, and we will continue to lead the way. It means I'm going to smoke a lot of weed tonight. Woo!
Some call it marijuana.
You're listening to Radical Russ on the Russ Belville Show.
Some of them call it ganja.
Welcome back, everybody. Time for us to go to behind the headlines.
Never mind.
Speaking of legalize it.
Legalize
That's
it.
right. We legalized it in Washington State, and part of that in I-502 was to have the Washington State Liquor Control Board and have a contract with a provider who would have consultancy and help with setting the regulations and the inspections and the monitoring, all the things that would involve the nuts and bolts of one of the country's first legal marijuana buying, selling, purchasing, all of that. Put it all together, the manufacturing, so forth. And this contract has been awarded to Mark Kleiman. This is from Yahoo News. The state of Washington, which legalized the recreational use of marijuana in November, has hired its first pot czar, a $300 per hour consulting firm that will help sort out the complexities of setting up and regulating a cannabis market. The company is called Botech, and the chief executive is Mark Kleiman. He is a UCLA professor who has written a book about marijuana legalization, and the initial funding from the Liquor Control Board here is $100,000 for these guys for this project. And other subcontractors include the Rand Corporation and Steep Hill Labs out of Oakland, California. Now, an interesting thing that Q13 Fox picked up in Washington State, their headline is, "State's new marijuana consultant once said legalization, quote, can't be done." Kleiman has said in the past that the type of policy Washington State has can't work. Not as long as pot is still illegal on the federal level. In a 2010 op-ed piece in the Los Angeles Times, Kleiman wrote, quote, "There's one problem with legalizing, taxing, and regulating cannabis at the state level. It can't be done. It's going to have to be at the national level rather than state by state. Any other approach is a pipe dream." End quote. That's 2010, folks. That's not too long ago that Mark Kleiman, the guy in charge of setting up regulations for Washington State, said it couldn't be done. Now, in his defense, the Washington State people replied, well, that was, a different time. Things have changed since then because of the legalization of the elections, yada, yada, yada. I don't think 2 years ago is that much time. So I thought, let's look back and get some newer quotes from Mark Kleiman, and it just so happens that I interviewed Mark Kleiman right here on the Russ Belville Show. It was episode number 29, I believe. And we interviewed after his book had come out, Marijuana Legalization, Everything You Need to Know. And we finally got around to the interview, talking to him. And at the 4:20 mark in the interview, oddly enough, I asked him about what would be the economic effect of legalizing marijuana in a state. If one state were to legalize marijuana, because at the time you had Washington, Colorado, and Oregon, what would be the effect? This was Mark Kleiman back last July.
Distinction here. There's legalization at the state level, as Colorado and Oregon and Washington are now considering for the fall. And there's legalization at the national level. Compared to the current fully illegal situation, legalization at the state level would cut the price of marijuana by about 90%, a little less. Rand estimates that an ounce of marijuana that sells for $300 in a California dispensary would go for about $50 in a fully legalized retail state, because the production would still have to dodge federal enforcement, so you couldn't have a farm field of it or a greenhouse full of it.
Sure.
But you could rent a house and grow it inside the house, and that's probably not enough activity for the DEA to pay much attention to. And it would be legal under state law. And doing the calculation about how much you have to rent the house for and how much you have to pay for the Grow-Lux bulbs and the cultivators and so on, Rand has estimated that the full retail price would be $40 to $50 an ounce.
And we hear from... All right, so $40 to $50 an ounce, full retail price under the Rand estimate. We'll see what it ends up being in Washington State. If you're going to pick the over-under on that, I'd pick the over. Here's another clip that we spoke to about the 8:16 mark in the interview, where we started talking about the price of marijuana, and I kind of pointed out that, hey, you're talking to a marijuana legalization guy. When you say the price would go down, that doesn't sound like a bad thing to me. Doesn't sound like a bad thing to the consumer to have better quality marijuana at lower prices. Kleiman disagreed with that and compared marijuana to alcohol in a very, very interesting way.
A really good thing. Reminds me of an old ad for some brand of premium scotch I saw in New Yorker a million years ago. It said, if the difference in price between, I don't know, Chivas Regal or Johnny Walker Black or whoever it was, and ordinary scotch matters to you, you're drinking too much. If paying, what's a joint cost these days of good quality pot? Maybe
$7, $10.
$4?
Sure.
Yeah, all right. And it'll keep two people stoned for 4 hours, roughly. So they're paying 50 cents an hour to get stoned. So the candy bar they eat because they got the munchies costs more than the pot did. If the price of the pot matters, you're smoking too much pot.
If the price of the pot matters, you're smoking too much pot. Apparently, there's some magical level at which you've had too much, and Mark Kleiman knows what it is. So, of course, his plan here is to make marijuana, and this is his quote from a little bit later on in the interview. He says, "My view is we'd be better off conceding that some people are going to smoke too much pot, make it legal, and then try to make it as expensive as we can under legality and try to limit the marketing." Right? So try and make marijuana as expensive as we can, because if the price matters to you, you're smoking too much. He also in the interview points out how marijuana completely legalized federally, nationwide, where you could grow it with combines and harvesters, would be about the price of tea bags. Of course, he says that's bad as well. And probably the most amazing thing he had to say had to do with nobody ever died from smoking tobacco.
Not zero. This nobody ever died is sort of silly by those standards. Nobody ever died of smoking tobacco either.
Nobody ever died of smoking tobacco?
Well, if the rule is you're looking only at fatal overdoses, cannabis smoking damages the lung.
I concede there's not a fatal overdose for nicotine, but certainly it's the major contributor to lung cancer.
Yes, and it looks like cannabis does not cause lung cancer, but it does cause other kinds of lung damage. It's very implausible that nobody died of that. It's very implausible that nobody ever died of an accident that happened because he was stoned.
So there you go. That's your Washington State pot czar saying that nobody ever died of tobacco because nobody can overdose on it. Comparing marijuana to Chivas Regal and Johnny Walker.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man.
Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Yeah, I watch MTV all the time. They have the Rock Against Drug commercials, that whole campaign. And these guys have, like, slid into fucking school buses and killed 20 children, Rather than facial license, they made a public service announcement. Yeah, no shit. Yeah. I love these guys that is, hello, listen, don't get caught with drugs or you'll have to do a commercial just like this one. I think I found the message. The message is don't get caught. Rock Against Drugs. What a fucking name. Somebody was high when they came up with this title. It's like Christians Against Christ. Rock created drugs. What are they talking about? They go together, folks.
Funky roller ring.
Oh, yeah.
What's happening, Groovy Cats? This is your Funk Master of Ceremonies, Big Daddy. And I want you to join me every Thursday night at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, right here at the Funky Roller Ring.
Oh, yeah.
Your home of soul, funk, and disco, baby.
Funky-licious.
There's always a party at the Funky Roller Ring.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Irie Wednesday, featuring reggae, ska, and other world music genres. You can get downloads and more information about all our Daily Toker Tunes by visiting music.radicalruss.com. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tunes.
All right, we made it to the middle of the week. That means it's time to get Irie. Brian the Red is not in here for today, but he'll be in here later tonight, 8 p.m. Pacific time, for Red Eyes Reggae Flashback, the best of roots reggae. Oh, you'll love it. So check that out. And if you can't stay up that late on the East Coast, you can catch it tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern time, the replay of Red Eyes Reggae Flashback. I'll be in here helping him run the show just as well. So check that out. Also, if you're, you're used to hearing Dr. Mitch coming up after this break, but we won't have Dr. Mitch today. He's involved in a very interesting event that he's taking part in. And I just don't know how much I can say about it, so I don't know what to call it. That's why I'm kind of stuttering here. It's like, I don't know how much he wants to reveal. We'll talk to him about it next week and find out what fun he had and, see what he wants to say about it. So there we go. Also, just want to mention I will be in Olympia, Washington on Saturday, going up there to Frankie's, the pot-friendly club, and we're having the Washington Normal fundraiser up there. For more information, you can check out wanormal.org and may even see Pookie up there, apparently, so that'll be really, really cool. Also, other details we got to get out. 420 is happening out there at Denver, and we've got a booth out there. We hope you can make it out there. All sorts of fun people coming out. Georgia Mom from Marijuana, Sharon Ravert's coming out. Big Daddy Fink will be there. I will be there. Lots of the crew. I'm sure Ganja John will be out there. We're going to have ourselves a hell of a time with the first Cannabis Cup in America. All right, we got to get to the music. And, you know me, I like, I don't have much reggae knowledge, but I know what I like. And I like these guys, the Easy Star All-Stars, because they pick tunes I already know, and they reggaify them. They've got Radio Dread, if you're into Radiohead. They've got Dub Side of the Moon, if you're into Pink Floyd. And they've got Easy Star's Lonely Hearts Dub Band, if you're into Sgt. Pepper's, if you're into the Beatles, as I am. So we're going to take this one. This features Kirsty Rock with Easy Star All-Stars. She's Leaving Home on Irie Wednesday, Daily Toker Tunes.
Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock as the day begins, silently closing her bedroom door, leaving the note that she hoped would say more. She goes downstairs to the kitchen, clutching her handkerchief. Quietly turning the back door key, stepping outside, she is free. She is leaving. She's leaving home after living alone for so many years. Father snores as his wife gets into her dressing gown. Picks up the letter that's lying there. Standing alone at the top of the stairs, she breaks down and cries to her husband, Daddy, our baby's gone. Why would she treat us so thoughtlessly? How could she do this to me? She is leaving home after living alone for so many years. Friday morning at 9 o'clock, she is far away, waiting to keep the appointment she made, meeting the man from the motor trade. She is something inside that was always denied for so many years. She's leaving home.
And now, another episode of Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre. I'm your host, Leonard Pinthgarnell III. Tonight we take a look at one of the finest works in the cannabis cinema, 1996's Half-Baked, starring David Chappelle, as interpreted by the Royal Shakespearean Cannabis Theatre Company. In this scene, Chappelle's character, Thurgood Marshall, has just admitted his addiction to cannabis to a room full of narcotics addicts. One addict, played in the film by Robert Saget, and interpreted here by the Royal Company's Sir Frederick Farrach, takes umbrage at the suggestion.
I find preposterous the notion that you, sir, may be addicted to cannabis. In times previous, I have undertaken lubricious endeavours, most revolting and unbecoming of a proper gentleman, in my servitude to the wicked powder of the coca leaf. Lo, that is an addiction whose chains would bind Hercules. At any point in history, could one identify a moment in your life so sullied by your ignominy as a cannabis slave? Methinks not! Boo this man!
For Cannabis Shakespearean Theatre, I'm Leonard Pinthgarnell III.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact Normal at norml.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Welcome back, everybody. 29 after the hour. And last weekend, I was so honored to be a part of the first Southern Cannabis Reform conference that was held at the Springforth Center at close to the Georgia Tech campus. I think it was almost on it. I don't know what the particulars are, but it was a great place to have a conference there. And we had lots of activists from lots of states there. North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, just a really good conference. And one of the speakers that appeared there came to us from outside of the typical marijuana conference speaker list, I guess you could say. And in the picture there, she's on the left. Her name is Tanya Blasbalg, and she is a representative for the Canadian Consortium for the Investigation of Cannabinoids, sort of a liaison between pharmaceutical companies and cannabis researchers. And she had a very interesting presentation. We'll present that to you right now here in our Activist Agenda.
We will get to the raffle in just a moment, but first we have a very special guest here for a presentation. Exciting developments in the medical cannabis movement. Please welcome Tanya Blasbalg from the U.S. Medical Education Liaison for the Canadian Consortium for the Investigation of Cannabinoids.
Thanks so much. And as you probably noticed, it's quite a mouthful, so I'm going to use the term CCIC to talk about my organization. I just want to give a really quick thank you to Sharon for letting me up here pretty much at the last minute and giving me this time to present. Yay. So I'm going to talk about a really specific area in the cannabis movement, and it's the issue of continuing medical education for healthcare practitioners. And when I use that term, what I mean is physicians, nurses, physician's assistants, people who practice medicine. So what brought me to this field was my first experience of Venice Beach, California, when I discovered what medical marijuana looks like over there for the first time. And I thought to myself, well, is this really optimal patient care? If you look at this sign, what I love about the one on the right is that it not only lists every single condition you can think of, but just in case they add at the bottom, or any chronic or persistent medical condition. And I think this is really great if your goal is to get access to cannabis, and I'm not going to judge that at all. But I ask the question, is this representative of optimal patient care? When we think about optimal patient care, I think you can't devalue the importance of the patient-physician relationship. Optimal health outcomes come from working closely with a doctor who knows your history. They know what other drugs you're taking and what kind of risks they might introduce. They know you. They hopefully know your family. They know you as a person. And a walk-in clinic where you just drop in and get your recommendation, you're not going to get that kind of quality of care. And in fact, your regular doctor, who hopefully sees you at least once a year, might not even know that you're using this and might not know how to appropriately assist you in that. So this is another way of looking at what we call the pot-doc problem. And I'm sorry to point out Arizona in this situation. I think the great thing about Arizona is that they actually have this data and they collect it. But if you look at Arizona, more than half of the prescriptions in that state of over 14,000 physicians are written by just 12 physicians. Go to the next one. It doesn't get better when you look at almost 75% of those recommendations. It's only 24% who are doing those recommendations. Chances are that a lot of those patients have a different primary care doctor or even a different specialist for their particular condition, and it just highlights the gap in care and the gap in communication. So here's another way of looking at that gap. As many of you may know, the science of cannabis lags behind science for other medications and for other aspects of human physiology. There are a lot of reasons for that. Some of them are actually very valid and good reasons, and some of them are bad. And what this is it's a survey of Medscape. Medscape is it's a repository of all kind of accepted medical literature. And what you can do is you can search year by year how many publications, scientific publications, came out on cannabis or cannabinoids year after year. And if you look from 1962 all the way through early 2000s, there wasn't a whole lot of data out there. And a lot of our doctors in practice today went to medical school at that time, and so they haven't learned about the latest in medical research on cannabis and cannabinoids. I wanted to take a deeper look at this, so I did a little survey of test prep questions for the medical board called the USMLE. I wanted to know, in order to pass the test to become a doctor, what do you have to know about cannabis and cannabinoids? And what I found was really surprising, although I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. You have to know some of the really basic fundamentals about the cannabinoid receptors, where they're located, a tiny little bit about how they work, G protein-linked receptors, that's really just the very beginning of the story, and then why it's bad for you, what are the adverse effects. And the only therapeutic perspective on cannabis is in relation to, if you look at this bottom row, dronabinol, called Marinol is the brand name, and that's a prescription THC. It's a synthetic THC that comes in a pill form. So you can learn a little bit about that product, which has very limited clinical utility and very few indications. And that's basically what you get at a medical school. So you know, when we think about how do doctors learn things, you go to medical school, you get your curriculum there, and then once you're out in the world, you have to keep up with what's going on because medical science is constantly evolving. So in an ideal world, healthcare practitioners would keep up with the science on their own. They would get all the top medical journals, read them. They go to their local academic institutions and go to all of the lectures, and they would have discussions with their patients who, I want to point out, have a power to bring information to their doctors and say, you know, hey, have you heard about this? And I encourage everyone to try that. But in the real world, the way it works is on the next slide. In the real world, we have a whole, call it industry of pharmaceutical-sponsored medical education. And I put this slide together. It's a pretty detailed slide of all the strategies and tactics that are used in this world, in this particular world, to communicate to healthcare practitioners. And I was able to do that because that's the world I'm coming from. That's the world that I work in. I get paid by pharmaceutical companies to communicate with healthcare practitioners. So I'll go ahead and verbalize what some of you might be thinking. But you know, like most things that I judge from afar and don't really understand, the more I've gotten to know it, the more I've realized that the pharmaceutical world is actually very diverse, and have been able to find a role for myself there that I'm actually very proud of. And something about this world is that sometimes the money has very little impact on the content. And this can be a very powerful way of getting information to doctors. And what's great for me is that I know how it works, and I want to bring that model to medical cannabis. So moving along, current resources for healthcare practitioners who are interested in a scientific perspective on cannabis. There's my organization, the CCIC. There's Patients Out of Time, which has a phenomenal medical conference every 2 years. All of you should attend. It's a great mix of doctors and activists and industry people as well. The International Cannabinoid Research Society and the IACM, International Association of Cannabinoid Medicines. And there's a lot of overlap between them all. None of them are huge. They're all trying to have more impact. Leave it at that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my group, the CCIC. Our goal is to bring credibility to cannabinoid medicine. We are a nonprofit organization. We're formed in 2000 as an interdisciplinary research consortium. Our more than 200 members are primarily clinicians and scientists. I'm based in the United States. My role is to be the medical education liaison for the U.S. Although it's registered in Canada and obviously has the name Canada in the name, we have a global reach and membership. We do programs in the U.S. and around the world. And our official mission is to promote evidence-based education concerning the endocannabinoid system and therapeutic application of cannabinoid agents to clinical audiences. So we cover cannabis as well as other cannabinoid molecules. And we really stand for the endocannabinoid system, which is part of our physiology that is not, we feel, as well recognized in medicine as it could be. In terms of providing education to clinicians, we work in accredited programming, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. We've conducted over 50 live continuing medical education programs in Canada, Europe, and the United States. These are dinner meetings for physicians and health practitioners, workshops, clinical symposia, all the things that doctors are used to. I mean, they're used to attending these events and learning in these types of settings. We use the same exact tactics to talk about cannabis. To date, we've reached nearly 2,000 healthcare practitioners, and our feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. We do surveys, which is great. We're forced to do surveys after every event. We overwhelmingly get 4s and 5s, mostly 5s, in all of our reports, which is the top. This is a poster from our most recent meeting. It was in Washington, D.C. We actually got the Department of Health to speak there and share the Washington, D.C. Guidelines, so they could have a direct conversation with the doctors there who are interested in recommending. We had over 60 people in attendance, and of those 60, there were 35 cannabis-naive physicians in the audience. So it's a great opportunity for us. So I want to talk a little bit about the value of what we call CME, continuing medical education. That means it's accredited. There's an accrediting body in the United States. We work very closely with our academic partner, University of California, San Francisco. We got our accreditation through them. And the really great thing about it is that doctors, in order to maintain their medical licenses, usually have a requirement to fulfill a certain number of credits a year. Like you get credits in school, it's like they never leave school. So there's a real benefit to them attending our programs because they can receive those credits by learning about cannabis. It's a really nice model. There's a funding firewall. So this is for pharma as well as for us. Whoever is funding the program can have absolutely no impact on the content. So no matter where the money is coming from, what you're hearing from comes from the physician who is talking to the other physicians. And there is no need for doubt or suspicion because of that. It creates an environment of unbias. The only bias that's up there is the bias of the individual who is presenting the information. And our programs are interactive, so if anyone wants to challenge that, they can. Go ahead. So that's okay. It's all right. I'll just make the point that we are for healthcare practitioners and by healthcare practitioners, showing it's really relevant. Just a little bit of information about our faculty. Basically, we've got superstars in the field, and that's really exciting to me, that the people who speak in our programs I encounter in the pharma world, and where no one even recognizes their role in cannabis. They are world-renowned and recognized for their work in pulmonology, in HIV, in oncology, in neuropsychology, all of those fields you see listed right there. We've got them covered, and if you know about cannabis, you know that it's relevant to all of those. So it's really powerful for us to have those very well-respected speakers working with us. I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges, but only very quickly. I think the number one thing is funding. That's probably something that we all face, is where is the money to pay for all of this? We don't have $1 billion pharma company to pay for this. It's $1 billion drug, but it's pretty hard to get that money. And so that's something that we're working on. We have to think of alternative strategies. Our perfect partners would be state governments who are implementing medical marijuana laws, but they're all broke, and most of them are doing it to make money to make up for their deficits. I'm going to roll through the next slide. I could really talk at length about this, but there's not a lot of time. But I'll just say that doctors can sometimes, even though they're a group that is probably best convinced by evidence and data, sometimes they have preconceived ideas that keep them from even getting in the room in the first place. Moving on, and I'm gonna kind of cruise right through this too, because there's something else that's really exciting that I want to talk to you about. So next slide, please. There are limitless opportunities for us. We can do additional live meetings. We've done so many already. Online CME is definitely in the works. Most doctors get their information online these days. grand rounds, which is something physicians do. We can develop a medical school cannabinoid curriculum. Everyone in my group wants to work on that. Patient education materials. This last bullet's a little complicated. There's so many possibilities, and in the state of Georgia, we have a really unique opportunity that I'm going to talk about in the amount of time I have left. So I'm definitely not an expert in this situation. Luckily, we have some people here who are and who know this from the sidelines. But in Georgia, we have what's called a Controlled Substance Therapeutic Research Act. This was originally passed in 1980, called the Medical Marijuana Necessities Act. It's one of nearly 35 state laws that were passed in the late 70s and early 80s to provide access to patients. This was a huge shock to me when I learned about this. I had no idea. It's overseen by the Georgia Composite Medical Board, which is really nice because, I find that in the cannabis movement, you have this decision, do we go for medical, do we go for recreational? What's nice about this is that this is in the hands of the Georgia Composite Medical Board. They have no say about recreational. This is something that they have been charged to do, and we don't even have to ask the question because we're not asking them to choose between one or the other. And what it is it's a program that combines compassionate access and data collection in the format of a randomized clinical trial. All right. So moving on. The way it was designed is it was for patients who do not respond to conventional treatment, who are either suffering severe side effects to cancer chemotherapy or glaucoma. And there's supposed to be what's called a Patient Qualification Review Board appointed by the Georgia Composite Medical Board. So this is a panel of physicians and one pharmacist whose job it is to review patient applications for approval to be in the program and gain access to medical cannabis. And their job is to also design and conduct a clinical trial. So the patients get access, and they can participate. They can collect data on the patients and find out what the story is about how cannabis works. Supply is supposed to come from NIDA, and the administration costs are supposed to be charged to the physician who may bill the patient. And I was kind of excited to find out that back in the early 80s, this program was implemented, and there were nearly 100 patients enrolled, actually over 100 patients. There were 3 groups. They were comparing Marinol, the oral pill, to standardized smoking, like you must smoke this much at this time of day every day, versus the patient controlling how much they want to smoke. And I was able to find this data. That was really neat that this thing was up and running. Interestingly, in Georgia, they found that all treatments were pretty much equivalent. These are very small sample sizes. They're considered equivalent. The 5 other states who collected data at that time found that cannabis was somewhat superior, actually, to Marinol. But again, without enough patients, you can't say for sure. The really exciting thing about this program is that it's current. As of 2010, this law has technically been implemented again. And if you go to the Georgia Composite Medical Board website, you'll find that there is an open call for application to doctors to serve on this board. And so the first step that's limiting the implementation is simply the number of applications that have come in. And so when we put this together with the need for medical education, we see a really potentially powerful situation where if you can educate doctors about this potential and get them excited to learn more and motivated to run a clinical trial, perhaps you can get some really good physicians to apply and fill the board seats and get this thing up and running. So just imagine, this fall there's going to be a Medical Association of Georgia House of Delegates meeting for $1,500. You can have a table there and gain access to 200 delegates. For $2,500, you can be a sponsor and actually talk to them. I think there's a lot of potential there. And Emory University collaborated with the state back in the 80s to run the initial trial, and I don't see any reason why they couldn't do that again. So there's just a world of possibilities out there. And that's me. Again, the U.S. Medical Education Liaison. There's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out.
Tanya Blasbalg from the Southern Cannabis Reform Conference there in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was kind of an interesting presentation to watch. The slides are available through links up at our blog at 420radio.org. So just click on the blog link. Should be able to find her presentation up there if you want to check out some of the data she was presenting. When we come back, we'll have some behind the scenes of Atlanta media interviewing our reformers in Georgia. Stick around.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
To say that there was one question that was voted on that ranked fairly high, and that was whether legalizing marijuana would improve the economy and job creation. I don't know what this says about the online audience, but the answer is no. I don't think that is a good strategy to grow our economy. So.
Nearly 1 million lives wrecked by a marijuana arrest every year, Mr. President. Politely tell President Obama what you think about legalization by calling the White House at 202-456-1111.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical rant.
I am so proud of the reformers that I got to meet down there in Atlanta, Georgia, who came from all over the South. Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, Florida, North Carolina. I think I named them all. But it was so exciting to get to meet all of them. And one of the things that really struck me was the ability of the reformers there to make the best use of the media. Sharon Ravert from Georgia Moms for Marijuana and Peachtree Normal was featured on one of the evening news, as was Diane Goldstein from LEAP, who came in from California. I got the opportunity to kind of float around behind the scenes while they were being interviewed by the local media and catch some of the stuff that didn't make the airwaves for the news. So check these out.
Focus on specifically marijuana and personal use amounts. That, you know, not the trafficking aspect. 10 pounds is trafficking. Right. We want something, you know, even if we move penalties, misdemeanor up to 4 ounces, it's now 1 ounce. If we moved it 4 ounces, that means all these people here would not be felons. They would still be misdemeanor violators. That's what I'm saying is that will keep that felony record, keep that felony off your record. Right. And you won't carry it the rest of your life.
And cost.
Yeah, cost and the whole stigma attached to it. College education, employment, all that is attached to the felony.
Right.
So,
do you think
Thank you for coming. Yeah, just a little press conference, and then, you know, we wanted to show the quilt to everyone. Moms for Marijuana tries to do all this at no charge, and it's going to be coming as well to the Southern Cannabis Reform Conference that we're having this weekend with all the groups, but we wanted to show it to people where they could come and see it for free.
First question that is, if you can consume flammable liquids,
I think what brings people to the table is facts, and it's policymakers. So, for example, in Colorado and in Washington, you had sheriffs who were going to be elected that were vying to be more supportive of the Washington initiative. You had conservatives like Tom Tancredo or Democrats like Jared Polis who publicly came out and supported it. And everybody recognizes it's a nonpartisan issue, is that what we're doing isn't working. And so I think what you have to do is figure out what that specific legislator's position is and how you address it. Are they into crime prevention, into public safety? Well, I would tell you right now from a public safety perspective is that we don't have any control over the drug market. We're incredibly reactive. And by continuing to impose prohibition policies, all we do is empower the drug dealers. And from a mother's perspective, because I'm a mother and a grandmother, I'm a Republican, so I really take a conservative position, is ending prohibition and appropriately controlling and regulating the drug market, both medical cannabis and recreational adult level use cannabis, will promote public safety because it will take the control from the people who are going to profit at our children's expense.
What kind of stress does it put on law enforcement and departments to have to police and have to deal with that of trying to take marijuana and marijuana dealers and people who use marijuana?
You know what? It's a huge fiscal diversion of our critical resources. So, for example, I ran a 6 or 7 man surveillance unit, and we were a multifaceted team. Not only did we do narcotics, but we also did career criminals. And so what happens is, because the federal government uses fiscal incentives to continue to promote the drug war, it takes away critical resources from actually going after criminals. You see it in crime stats. 6 of 10 murders only go solved. So our solvability factor for violent crime has gone down tremendously. 9 out of 10 burglaries don't get solved. 6 out of 10 rapes. And I can't remember what it is for violent assault. So every time you put $1 into marijuana, you're taking away $1 that is better spent going after, quite frankly, real criminals. And those real criminals is what we should save our prisons for and our jails for. Not for kids that have a youthful indiscretion, not for adult responsible use of cannabis that, in fact, is used every day responsibly by millions of people across America.
Any final thoughts today? Anything I didn't ask that you maybe wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's critically important of why I represent a criminal justice profession, I think something that is missing in the conversation is that law enforcement was set out to serve our constituency. And right now we undermine a huge portion of our constituency, and the drug war has changed us from what the purpose of law enforcement was. In California and across our great nation, law enforcement is regulated under a statutory authority that describes us as peace officers. That's a significant difference, and words matter instead of police officers. What the drug war has done, it has turned us into policing.
I love that point of view that she brings, that the drug war has turned our law enforcement from peace officers to policing people. Oh, I'm telling you, we are going to win, and win sooner than you think, with strong women leading the charge, just like it happened with alcohol prohibition. I've been saying this for years. Nothing wrong with my brothers, but sisters are doing it for themselves. That's all the time we got here in Hour 1. Stay tuned for Hour 2. Toker Talk Radio, I'll be presenting the Georgia Reform Panel. Representatives from Georgia Normal, Georgia Care, Peachtree Normal, one of the SSDP chapters, I forget which one, Georgia State? I think Georgia State, and a public defender from Dublin, Georgia. It's an interesting discussion, especially from a West Coast perspective. Hey, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Hey, hey, hey.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant